Thanks, Christy. Good afternoon, all. I'll try and be as quick as I can because I know time is of an issue here. And can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. This project came about when I saw Ron White, the statistics guy from the EPA. You probably all know Ron. He was lying curled up in a corner in a fetal position, crying uncontrollably as a result of the crap data he's getting from smaller waste depots. That's a bit metaphorical. But it's always been an issue. It's been an issue with my council. It's been an issue with a lot of councils that have smaller sites. There are eight regional waste groups in New South Wales, and they're supported by the EPA. As a group, we decided to do something to ease Ron's pain. We instigated the Statistic Improvement Project to see if we could improve the data by finding ways to make it easier to collect that data. I was asked to manage the project, and I've had help certainly along the way from a guiding group, including Christy, Alison Leckie from NIRW, Ron White himself, who's the EPA's answer to Anthony Green, and Danielle Carter, the EPA Manager for Regional Delivery. We secured a grant from the EPA, and each regional waste group contributed funding as well. We ran a process to find a suitable consultant, and that led us to Impact Environmental Consulting and Thomas will take it from there. Thanks, Thomas.
Thanks, John. So can I just get a show of hands? Does anyone here operate small landfills without weighbridges in the rural areas? Yeah, perfect. So we've got heaps. So you guys don't need to see this, but for the metro guys, this is what we're talking about. Typical trench landfill, access road coming in, some scrap metal, organics. So this is what it looks like when people are arriving to drop their waste normally. So this is the kind of facilities we'd like to improve the data from. So why this project came about, a few years ago we did a camera project at unmanned landfills where we installed a few remote cameras and we just tracked the vehicles coming and going to try and figure out just how many vehicles are actually using the site, what kind of stuff could be in their loads. And from that we did a drone survey as a bit of a comparison, and we realised that some of the EPA weight factors when used in the rural areas, they weren't the most accurate. And then from that it spawned the Statistics Improvement Project. We wanted to find out how the various methods the councils do use, because not all of them use EPA weight factors, which you'll see in a slide or two, to build on their existing methodologies, and just to see if we could put together some weight factors for the regional areas that would be more accurate, and also some technologies that could be utilised. So these were the councils who gave us some data. We had Gunnedah Council helped us out, Mid Coast Council, Upper Hunter, Bathurst, Goulburn and Eurobodalla. So we covered a fair bit of the state and we got a lot of the regional councils involved. We sent out a survey asking how they're collecting their data at the moment, and these were the ones we heard from. So 29 out of 96 Renew councils responded to our survey. Net waste, thanks Christy, you managed to chase everyone up. But we covered all of the waste groups, which was good. So this is a question: how often do you check vehicle numbers and quantities entered in the waste facility? So we knew some councils don't check every year just due to resourcing issues. They've got massive areas to cover. Some of it's an hour drive to some of these small tips. So we asked for most of their unmanned facilities, how often do they check? So about half check more than once a year. So they're the guys who would have, say, staffed landfills. That most are in that group. And the other ones, generally the other half, can be, some even less than once every 5 years. So they might just have a number from 5 years ago that they keep reusing. And when staff come and go, it's really hard to get that continuation of why that number was there. So that is one of the challenges. So this is the question for how most of the councils, how those 29 councils are collecting their data at the moment. So the most common one, if I can get the laser pointer to work, is vehicle count using EPA weight factors. So this is the 0.06 of a tonne and 0.3 of a tonne for everyone in New South Wales who knows that. For sedans, 0.06 of a tonne. If someone arrives with a trailer, the weight factor is 0.3. So councils aren't obliged to use that outside of the levy paying area, but in the absence of any other factors, everyone has kind of gravitated towards these metro waste levy factors as their source of data for when they have vehicle counts. The next most common one was visual eyeball, personal judgment. That's just going out, roughly the dimensions of the trench. You can, lick your finger, have a look. But, the standard trench is dimensions, so you can tell roughly how full it is and you take a guess from that. A lot of them use their non-EPA factors, so they might have tinkered with the factors. And as you can see, not a heap use surveyors, and that's understandable considering just how many small landfills are around. It would be pretty prohibitive to take volumetric surveys everywhere. So we did just a bit of an inspection to it. Went through Walker, Coonabarabran, Warren, Condobolin, Merriwa, just visiting some of these landfills and looking what some of the common features there were at some of the main facilities in the LGA, because some of these larger councils, for example, Dubbo, Bathurst, Tamworth, their main landfill will have a weighbridge, but they'll have a series of other landfills around in the Shire that do not have them. But other ones, say Condobolin, Warren, these councils are small enough that their main landfill doesn't have a weighbridge either. So we wanted to see what the larger facilities were like, because that's where most of the tonnages will be coming in. So 7 landfills we inspected. At most of the landfills we toured through, they had a gatekeeper checking off vehicles that come and went. Often it was just a paper, paper list on a clipboard. Various plant, so some people were running track excavators, some excavators, some compactors. So if they are measuring volumetrics, they really have to take into account the different compaction rates that each of those different pieces of plant would be getting. The common measurement at the gate was just a wheelie bin, car, ute, and most of them had free household disposal. So not all of them were really recording vehicles that were coming and going either, because a lot of councils have a rate each year that you just pay, and then as long as you're a local resident, you get to come and tip for free. So there's not need to log all that transactions, because if they recognise the car, it just gets waved in. So the first piece of data we got, so we emailed a lot of the councils and we said, can you help us out here? We'd like some transactional data to see what the typical weight of vehicles were. And initially in the first month or two, we didn't really hear back from anyone. So we started on the data that we got, which was from Goulburn and Bathurst, and we just started looking at transfer station data, because a lot of the standard density factors for waste tends to be around 160 to 300 kilograms per cubic metre. In the survey, that was another question we asked. What's the typical ranges of densities that you use for waste? But we got some tonnage data from Goulburn and Bathurst transfer stations, and once we analysed it, the density of waste in the transfer bins was down at 100 kilograms per cubic metre, which was a lot lower than what we would have been expecting, but it makes sense. Once you have some bed frames and a few things that can wedge in the transfer bins, it can really bring that density down quite fast. And here's the next slide. So Gunnedah, this is their, so we're looking at the red columns here. So at Breeza, Mullally, Tambur Springs, they take these rural transfer bins back to the Gunnedah landfill. So this is the weight per vehicle on the right there. At rural landfills, Carroll and Kerr-Lewis, they use the EPA weight factors. And this is the per vehicle weight. So this just starts to give you an idea of what the difference can be with the EPA weight factors. And that's probably a 2.5 times overestimate when you apply the metro weight factors in the regional areas. So that was Gunnedah. So we got Gunnedah and we thought, okay, this is interesting. We'd like to push a little bit more and just try and find some more individual transaction data. And that's where Upper Hunter Shire Council really helped us out. So in 2016, they were using the weight factors. The EPA, I believe, gave them a grant for a weighbridge, which we're thankful for this project, because post-July 2016, their weighbridge went active. So we had a natural experiment where before all the vehicles were logged using EPA weight factors. Afterwards, every vehicle was weighed in and out. So we had net weights for everything. So we took 4 months of daily transactions. So in total, it was 1,300 weighbridge transactions. And this gives you a bit of an idea. So the blue columns are the EPA weight factors. So we can see the peak here at 0.06 and the peak here at 0.3. There's some other ones that snuck in there. And the orange ones are the count of So 0.0 to 0.06, 0.06 to 0.12. So we grouped all of the transactions into ranges, and as you'll see, around 93% of the 2018 transactions, which are the orange ones, were below 0.3 of a tonne. So the reality in the rural areas is the whole graph is skewed to the left, which means a lot of the vehicles are quite a fair bit lighter than what the EPA weight factors when used west of the ranges would predict. And you can see that, you know, the 0.03 just stands out, 0.3 stands out massively compared to what the orange weights are in that area. And this gives us an idea of each month. So we want to look at the dark blue and the dark green. So the average vehicle pre-weighbridge over the 4 months was about 199 kilos. The average vehicle post-weighbridge was 120 kilos. So we've got about an 80 kilogram difference if we can, between when the weighbridge was operational and when the weight factors were being used. We cross-checked the Upper Hunter data against Gloucester, who are another regional landfill. So they also have an EPA grant. They didn't have the data recorded beforehand, so we couldn't do a similar before and after comparison. But it gives you a good idea of they're skewed to the left also. So the vast majority of transactions are, you know, in that really light range, 0.0 to 60 kilograms, 60 to 120. So a lot of these are, you know, hatchback sedans, really not carrying heavy loads of bricks and concrete, other things. So when we tried to condense this down to some regional weight factors that we think could be a bit more accurate, we had a couple of considerations. We wanted to limit it to domestic light vehicles. That was just the scope for the project. We wanted an average number for automatic vehicle counters and other things. So we just wanted an average number. If you could go out and put down some pneumatic tubes, have a way of recording the vehicles that came and went. We just wanted a number that you could times by the number of cars to give you a tonnage estimate. And then for the guys who had gatekeepers, we just wanted several categories that the gatekeeper could choose from, use a bit of discretion. So this is what we put together. So unmanned sites, about 120 kilograms per vehicle based off the Upper Hunter and Gloucester data. The data needed for that would be, say, output from pneumatic tubes, induction counter, just your RMS kind of road counting or traffic counting pieces of technology. For the manned sites, so Riverina, they helped us out, and we retinkered with their weight factors because we thought they had a pretty good set of weight factors they set up, and we tested it against the Upper Hunter data, and we found out that it was a pretty close match for what were the average Riverina vehicle and then our average Upper Hunter data that we got per vehicle. So they basically use similar to the EPA weight factors, but they've got this minimum load, which is down at 10 kilograms, which really helps account for all of these small loads that we saw on the graphs before that are between 0 and 60 kilograms, small load, up to medium load. And so the up to medium load, that would be up to the 300 kilograms if we were using the EPA data. So it just allows that a few steps up before reaching the large load, which is up to 300. So on the technology side, this was in the survey. What is the main limitation preventing councils from having a better understanding of the tonnages disposed in landfill budget? You know, a lot of these councils can't afford to staff their landfills, which would, you know, help answer a lot of the data problems. But when you have to pay 60, 70 grand a year for someone to be on the gate, councils just don't have that in the budget. So we just wanted to have a bit of think about some of the technology. At a few projects, I've had councils who've been able to help me out with their works department. They just put down some pneumatic tubes, as you can see there on the right, and just log the vehicles that were coming and going. The works department will always, you know, keep these anyway. So we're able to have a good idea of the vehicles coming and going. Lets you identify whether there's trucks coming in too, people sneaking in commercial waste. You kind of start to know whether all the vehicles that are coming in are induction loops, as you can see on the right there. Just these are things where you wouldn't need necessarily a gatekeeper, but it's an infrastructure thing. There might be potential for a grant at some point. Something where you could put it in, count your vehicles coming and going to these unmanned sites, and then use an average weight factor and just start to get a bit of an idea of the actual tonnages, and some drone surveys, which Ray will probably touch on that a bit through the surveying. This is just another generic photo we took during one of the drone surveys down at in Lithgow Shire. Here was another key point, the digitisation of records. So I touched on it before, but when we've got the gatekeepers, a lot of them are still using paper records. It's a clipboard, and they send it up to the waste manager, and it may sit on his desk for a month or two, and then it somehow gets digitised over into Excel. But we think they might be able to do a little bit better. Upper Hunter Shire, Parks Council, at their small landfills without weighbridges, they've just got a little gatehouse and a tablet, and they're going around checking off the vehicles as they come in. Especially with weight factors, it could make life a lot easier at these councils to take data from that tablet, filter it through weight factors, and just generate some of this reporting a lot easier than paper getting lost along the way. New staff coming along, you could just train them on the tablet. It could provide an option for a charge on waste too, not that a lot of councils necessarily want that, but then you've got the transactional side of things going along with the tablets. John will probably jump back up and we'll talk about what's next. So we're just circulating the findings for the councils at the moment, finalising everything. We want to do a follow-up survey in 12 months just to get some feedback on the factors, and we just need to a bit of dialogue with the EPA, because we don't want any of that annual waste data taking a sudden spike or a sudden drop if we tinker with the waste factors, which we are. So we just need to monitor it and see what the changes could be. And John will finish it off.
Thanks, Thomas. So where to from here? We've done a lot of work to get to this point, and we really appreciate the work that Thomas and his team have done to get to it. But we've not made any decisions as a group yet on where we will take this data and what we will do from here. But I'd like to think that we would start trialling some of these systems, some of these counting systems, and we'll be talking with the EPA about getting some further grant funding to be able to link with councils to put some of these systems in as trials where people think that they would be appropriate for them, or would make their task a lot easier. We'd like to think that that'd be a shared arrangement, that the councils that we would be looking at would say, well, we're thinking about this anyway, so we might put half the funding in and we would get a grant for some of the rest. So once we get that sort of information available, along with the information we've got here, we think it'll make it a lot easier for all of the councils who are in this situation to make better decisions about which way they could go to improve the data that they're getting at the moment. So that was the basis on what we started, improve the data, and we hope that these systems, when put in place, will get us to that point. Thanks, Thomas. Thanks a lot.